Have you ever made a statement like, I don't know what came over me. I don't really feel like myself right now. I don't know who that was, but that wasn't me. You're not going crazy. You don't have dissociative identity disorder or multiple, well, you do have multiple personalities. And that's what we're going to get into today. In the psychosynthesis theory, there is sub-personalities. In the internal family system perspective, it's known as parts. And you may notice, one minute you're confident at work, you're crushing it, you're hitting your goals, but as soon as you move into a different environment, maybe a more intimate environment, maybe a more personal environment, you find yourself anxious, feeling vulnerable, feeling shy. So you're not going crazy, but your personality is in conflict, and that's what we're going to look at today through the context of this book here, Psychosynthesis, from John Furman and Anne Gieler. And we're going to understand how we can bring more harmony to your psyche and what's going on within this conflict. And so you may notice, for example, the part of you that goes to work, it could be like an inner pusher. It pushes you to work long hours. It pushes you to meet the deadlines. You may notice that there's a little bit of anxiety underneath it. And more than that, you may notice that there's another part of you which is directly in conflict with it. You may notice that there's a part of you that wants to collapse, wants to give up, wants to quit the job altogether. And that part feels distinctly different, perhaps even resentful. And so you have an anxious part that turns up at work, and then you have a resentful part that wants to quit. And you may notice it isn't just this area, but it can show up in all of these other territories. It can show up in a romantic relationship. It can show up in your friendship. You may have a very chronic people pleaser, for example, that you can't help but say yes. You can't help but be helpful. You can't help but try and create a level of harmony and connection in relationship through this pleaser. But you may have another part of you, maybe again the resentful one or a more rebellious type, that wants you to not have harmony. It wants you to stand your ground, have boundaries. And so you feel pulled in these different directions. Part of you that wants to move forward, part of you that wants to move backwards. It's kind of like those old cowboy style things where they'd tie a horse to one arm, a horse on another, and then they'd slap its ass and your arms would get ripped off. That's what it feels like to be in this dynamic. You feel pulled in these different directions and you feel like you're being torn limb from limb. So what we need to do is we need to become aware on a different level. As Einstein said, you can't solve an issue on the level through which it was created. And so we need to become aware of something higher than these parts of ourselves, at a higher organizing function. In psychosynthesis terms, that is the I. So the human condition is one of paradox. We are both one and we are both many. It's clear how we've just spoken about the many here. But you may notice, whether you're in a pleaser, whether you're in an angry one or a rebel, whatever it is, you notice fundamentally, although your experience is different, fundamentally you feel like you. You feel like yourself. Just as you felt like you when you were 3, 9, 15, 20, 30, 40, however old you are, you'll notice there's a sense of I am me. And that is the ongoing continuity of the I, which is at a deeper or higher, depending on what kind of analogy you want to use, that's aware of these different parts of yourself. So no matter if you shift consciousness between these different states, whether you're giving childbirth, for example, or you're on a jet ski, there's a sense of an ongoing sense of yourself, whether you're in pain and agony or whether you're in ecstasy and having fun. So it's clear that our states of consciousness are able to move, they're able to fluctuate, they're able to change, but yet there's something persistent, consistent, transcendent to this. So I'm actually going to draw you an absolutely terrible diagram, so I'll be back in just a moment. So what I've just drawn is at the bottom we have psychological elements. So you have thoughts, perceptions, sensations, you have images from the mind, you have emotion. So you have these different elements, psychological elements. But those psychological elements are pulled together by an inner drive, perhaps an inner drive for belonging, creativity, love, or something else. And that pulls these psychological elements together and they create subpersonalities. But then we have a higher organizing function, which is the I. So here is my terrible diagram. Hope you can see. I'm going to try and get that into focus. And hopefully I'm back in focus. And so we have these different elements that come together, but the I is transcendent to these elements. It's also immanent, but that's a bit complex for now. So essentially it's immanent in that it can interact with them, but it's transcendent in that it's beyond them at the same time. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to organize. So I carry on mentioning organizing. A metaphor we can use for this is to think of the orchestra. So think of a part of you as the violinist, a part of you as the drummer, a part of you as the guitarist or the piano player. Whatever part of you feel could fit that as a metaphor. If they don't have a conductor, they don't have a higher synthesizing function, then they're going to create a complete mess. Let's be honest, it's not going to be something you want to listen to, right? So the conductor comes in, and as each of these instrumentalists look towards the conductor and relate to the rhythm, they come into harmony. And so as you become more aware of your I, this aspect of you that can direct and also see and relate to these parts of you, you can begin to bring them together into harmony. So one of the ways in which we can become more aware of the I is to simply notice these impulses we have towards action. So one way in which we can look at this is when we're very angry, we might make statements like, I'm so angry, I'm so mad. And when you're identified with the anger in that way, you see through a particular lens of perception. You see people you want to argue with, you see people you want to fight. You see people as antagonistic, people you need to guard and defend against. And so you see people in this particular way. You think through the perception of anger. But if you make a statement such as, I have anger, I notice anger, I notice hotness, I notice adrenaline in my arms. When you make those statements, you might already notice there's a subtle distance. So there's a subtle disidentification with these subpersonalities. One of the primary issues with the subpersonalities is we identify with them. When we're angry, we see through the perception of anger. When we're anxious, we see completely through the perception of anxiety. And so we're worried, have we left the gas taps on? Have we locked the doors? Is this person going to leave me? And we allow anxiety to control and rule our life in that moment. In the same way that when we have a more domineering pusher personality at work, all we can do is drive on and push on, despite the other needs and other areas in our life. For example, our relationship might be getting ruptured because all we do is spend time at work, and we're not allowing ourselves to find that balance because the pusher might have a level of anxiety underneath it that keeps pushing it on. So as we make statements, I have anger, I'm aware of anger, we then might have a level of spaciousness where we say, I have anger, but I also notice I feel sad. I have anger, but I feel fear. I have anger, but I insert other feeling, and then we become more aware of ourselves. And then we become more aware of the other parts of us in that moment. And as we do that, we can reach more harmony because we can ask ourselves questions like, how do I want to express this anger? Is it the most skillful thing to express it directly, to assert, to set a boundary, whatever's necessary? Or is perhaps that going to be rupturing, not the most skillful? Perhaps my anger here is actually completely irrelevant. It doesn't make sense right now. In this context, I'm just angry for no reason. Or I've overblown my anger for some reason. And so we can choose, what do we want to do with the anger? Do I want to direct it at the person? Do I want to use this anger and transmute it through perhaps some kind of artistic expression, through shaping clay, through writing a poem, through writing a song, through banging some drums? Whatever it is, we can begin to direct it and express it in a different way. Or simply put, maybe we can put words to our anger. We can talk and advocate for our anger in a different way. Because when we're wholly defined by our anger in that moment, when we're totally identified with it, we don't express ourselves clearly. It just spills out everywhere because it's just the anger that's talking. And so as you become aware of yourself, as you ask yourself these questions, that's the conductor coming into play. That's the conductor beginning to make a level of harmony within all of these instruments of your life. So as we begin to become aware of these different aspects of ourselves, we notice the different inner conflicts. We notice them pushing and pulling in different directions. We feel like we're on the horse getting torn apart. But as we become more aware of the I, we cultivate that I, that sense of aware ego, or that aspect on my absolutely terrible diagram that is at the top, more aware of these parts. We can begin to synthesize, bring harmony through like a conductor function. And so we end up being able to meet more of our needs, being able to express ourselves more fully. From a transpersonal perspective, imagine the transcendent self. It's able to use the personality in a different way because you have inner harmony. So you can achieve your goals, you can have flourishing relationships, you can express your needs, you can pursue creative projects. But when these aspects of you are in conflict, it's usually so because they're defending against something. They're defending against what in this book is known as non-being, that sense of existential anxiety that you're going to be annihilated or you're going to die or something horrible is going to go wrong. You're going to be abandoned or something like that's going to happen. And so these personalities organize around to guard and defend against that. But as you heal that and as you become more aware in this sense, you bring more harmony through that conducting function. So it's a hopeful psychology, psychosynthesis. Let me know what subpersonalities you have. Let me know about what inner conflicts you have and if this video has been helpful. I'll see you in the next one.